She said it with a smile. That was the worst part. Diane opened the door 3 inches, her pearls catching the hallway light, and smiled the way people smile when they've already won. Clara, I'm so sorry. We had to cap the guest list last minute. Theodore's side of the family got bigger than we expected. You understand? I didn't understand. I was Theodore's sister. Lily's hand was in mine, her fingers sticky from the caramel apple she'd eaten in the car, the one I'd promised her as a treat before we got to Grandpa Frank's house. She was wearing her good dress, the navy one with the white collar that she'd picked out herself, and she was holding a ceramic turkey she'd spent 3 afternoons painting at school. She'd sealed it in bubble wrap herself. She'd carried it on her lap the whole 2-hour drive from Providence because she didn't trust the trunk. Aunt Diane, Lily said, I made something for the table. Diane's smile didn't move. That is so sweet, honey. But we really just don't have the room tonight. You two should head back before it gets dark. Roads get icy out here. She said it like a favor, like she was doing us a kindness. Then the door clicked shut, and I was standing on my father's porch holding my daughter's hand while the smell of roasting turkey and wood smoke drifted through the gap in the weather stripping. I didn't knock again. I picked up the ceramic turkey from where Lily had set it down by the welcome mat, tucked it under my arm, and walked us back to the car. The gravel driveway crunched under my boots. Above the tree line the sky was going the dark purple color it gets in Connecticut right before a cold night locks in. Lily didn't cry right away. She waited until I buckled her in. She waited until she thought I wasn't looking. Then she pressed her forehead against the window and made a sound so small I almost missed it. Does Dad know we're here? She asked. My throat tightened. Her dad and I had been divorced for 3 years. She still asked questions like that sometimes. Questions that assumed things were simpler than they were. Dad's not here tonight, Bug, I said. This is Grandpa Frank's dinner. Is Grandpa Frank inside? Yes. Then why can't we go in? I didn't have an answer for that. Not one I could give her. I sat behind the wheel without starting the engine for a long time. The house was lit up at every window. My father's colonial. The one he'd lived in for 31 years. The one my mother had painted the shutters of herself the summer before she died. The one that still had the height chart penciled on the inside of the pantry doorframe where Theodore and I had measured ourselves every birthday until we were too old to care. Diane had repainted that pantry 18 months ago. I knew because my father had mentioned it on the phone. Confused. The way he got confused about things he couldn't quite name as losses, but felt as losses anyway. My phone was dark on the passenger seat. No text from Theodore. No missed call from my father. The dinner had started 45 minutes ago, according to the invitation I'd received, then unreceived, when Diane had sent a second email 3 days later explaining the revised seating situation and suggesting we try to connect over the holidays in a lower-key way. I had driven 2 hours anyway because my father had called me the week before, unprompted, and said, I want to see my granddaughter, Clara. Just come. So we came. I started the engine. I didn't know where I was driving. I just needed to move. I turned out of the driveway and onto Birchwood Road and drove past the stone walls and the bare oak trees and the houses with their lit-up windows and their smoke rising from their chimneys, and I thought about the first Thanksgiving after my mother died, when my father had held it together through the whole meal and then cried in the kitchen over the dishes, and I had dried every single plate without being asked because I was 17 and I didn't know what else to do for him. I thought about how Theodore had disappeared into his room that night. How even then he'd been good at that. Disappearing. Lily had fallen asleep by the time my phone rang. I almost didn't answer. The name on the screen surprised me enough that I pulled to the shoulder before I picked up. Uncle Gerald. My father's older brother, 74 years old, retired federal judge, lived alone in a farmhouse in the Berkshires since Aunt Rosemary passed. He called on birthdays and sometimes Christmas, and almost never in between. His voice on the phone was the voice he used in courtrooms, the one that didn't leave room for interruption. Clara, where are you right now? Not a question. A coordinate request. I'm on Birchwood, I said. About a mile from the house. We were turned away at the door. Silence. The kind that has weight to it. Turned away by whom? Diane. Another silence. Longer. Turn around, he said. Uncle Gerald. I am in that house right now, Clara. Sitting at a table that your grandfather built, and your father has been asking for you since before Grace. Turn the car around and come to the door. I will meet you there. Diane said there wasn't room. There are 4 empty chairs at this table. His voice dropped half a register. Turn around. I looked in the rearview mirror. Lily was still asleep, her cheek soft against the headrest, her ceramic turkey wedged carefully beside her. I thought about what it would be like to walk back up that driveway. I thought about Diane's smile and the 3-inch gap and the door clicking shut. Then I thought about my father asking where we were. I pulled back onto the road. Uncle Gerald was on the porch when we came up the drive, his coat on, his breath making small clouds in the cold air. He was a tall man, still straight-backed in his 70s, and when he saw us, he came down the steps without hesitating and put his arm around me and said, "There you are," like he'd been the one waiting, like we were the ones who were late. He crouched down to Lily's level. She was awake now, groggy, clutching her turkey. "You must be Lily," he said. "I've heard quite a lot about you." "I made this for the table," she said. She held up the turkey. He looked at it seriously, the way adults rarely look at things children make. "That is the finest turkey I have seen in a long time," he said. "And I mean that. Come on inside. It's too cold out here for fine art." The door was open, warm air and the smell of butter and rosemary, and something sweet pie, 2 kinds, rolled out to meet us. In the foyer, someone had already hung Lily's coat on the rack my father kept by the door, the old iron one shaped like a tree, before I realized Uncle Gerald must have sent someone to watch for us. We walked into the dining room. I had not been in this room since the previous Christmas, and I let myself take it in for a moment. My father's long mahogany table, the good china, the ivory set with the gold rim that my mother had saved for 12 years to buy. Candles lit, a centerpiece of dried wheat and small gourds. My father's watercolor of the Connecticut River hanging on the far wall, slightly crooked the way it always was because he refused to let anyone straighten it. And around the table, my father's neighbors, the Holloways, who'd come every Thanksgiving for a decade. My father's college friend Arthur and his wife, 2 couples I recognized as Theodore's friends from work. Theodore himself, at the far end of the table, his face doing something complicated when he saw me. Diane, standing near the kitchen doorway with a serving dish, her expression cycling very fast through several things before landing on a version of polite. And my father, at the head of the table, who looked up when I walked in, and whose whole face changed in a way that made my chest hurt. "There she is," he said, and his voice broke on the last word just slightly. "There's my girl." Lily ran to him. She always ran to him. He caught her and held her and closed his eyes for a second, and when he opened them they were wet. And he blinked and smiled and said, "Let me see this turkey." And she held it up for him, and he declared it the best centerpiece at the table and moved the dried wheat arrangement 3 inches to the left to make room for it, right in the center where everyone could see. Uncle Gerald had moved to the head of the room. He didn't sit. He remained standing, and when he cleared his throat, the conversation paused with the kind of automatic deference people extend to someone who has spent decades commanding courtrooms. "Before we continue," he said, "I'd like to address something. Frank, forgive me, but this needs to be said at this table, in front of these people." My father looked up, confused, but patient. He trusted his brother the way you trust someone who has never once steered you wrong. "Diane," Uncle Gerald said, "I'd like to understand something. This house has 12 rooms and a dining table that seats 14. Clara and her daughter drove 2 hours to be here tonight. You sent her away at the door. I'd like to hear your explanation for that, and I'd like to hear it honestly." The room did not breathe. Diane set down the serving dish. Her composure was extraordinary. I'll give her that. She'd had years of practice at it. "It was a question of the seating chart," she said. "Theodore's colleagues were already here. And there are 4 empty chairs at this table," Uncle Gerald said. The same words he'd said to me on the phone. Measured. Exact. "There have been 4 empty chairs at this table since before Grace. My nephew's colleagues account for 6 seats. The math doesn't support your explanation." Theodore's jaw tightened. He looked at Diane. She didn't look at him. "I had also hoped," Uncle Gerald continued, reaching into the inside pocket of his jacket, "to discuss something with this family tonight. Something I became aware of this week that I have been trying to find the right moment to address." He set a folder on the table. "Manila. Thick. Frank. Do you remember when you signed the agreement last spring to put the Millbrook property into a family trust?" My father frowned slowly. "Gerald, I don't think tonight is." "Bear with me," Uncle Gerald said. gently. "Do you remember signing that agreement?" "I signed something Diane brought me." She said it was the paperwork the accountant had prepared. "It was not," Uncle Gerald said. He opened the folder. "What you signed was a limited power of attorney that transferred management authority over the Millbrook property to Diane specifically. Not a family trust. Not shared. Diane. It was filed with the county recorder's office in April." He slid a document across the table toward my father. "Your attorney, your actual attorney, Frank, the one you've had for 20 years, contacted me on Monday because he noticed the filing and recognized the discrepancy. He had prepared no such document. The silence was a different kind now, heavier. It had a texture to it. My father put on his reading glasses with the slow, deliberate movements of a man who needs a moment before he can receive information that might hurt him. He looked at the document. He looked at it for a long time. His face did not collapse. It went very still, the way faces go still when the mind is working hard to catch up to something the heart already knows. "Theodore," he said. His voice was quiet, careful. "Dad," Theodore started. "Did you know about this?" Theodore looked at his plate. That was answer enough. Diane's composure had not broken. That was the strangest thing. She stood at the edge of the room with her hands folded in front of her, and her expression perfectly arranged, and I thought about all the times over the past 8 years that I had watched her do exactly this, stand in the eye of something and simply wait for it to pass. I had always mistaken it for grace. I understood now it was practice. "The Millbrook property," Diane said, "has been mismanaged for years. Someone needed to take responsibility for it. Frank, you've been..." "Diane." Uncle Gerald did not raise his voice. He never needed to. "There is also the matter of the Hepplewhite secretary desk that was removed from this house in August. Frank, you mentioned to me over the phone that you couldn't find it. You assumed it had been moved to storage." "It was in Mother's sitting room," my father said slowly. "She bought it the year Theodore was born." "It was sold," Uncle Gerald said. "I have the bill of sale. It went to an antique dealer in Hartford for $11,000. The money went into an account I'm looking into, but it is not Frank's account." He paused. "There are also 3 pieces from the dining room, sideboard, the silver candlesticks, and the serving ladle from the Whitfield set that appear to have been similarly liquidated." My father took off his glasses. He set them on the table beside his plate with the exactness of a man controlling himself very deliberately. He looked at his son. Theodore had not moved. His face had the look of someone watching a fire that he started and cannot stop. 31 years, my father said. Soft. Not to anyone in particular. Your mother and I lived in this house for 31 years. Theodore's voice, when it came, was barely audible. "Dad, it wasn't. Diane said it was just restructuring. She said..." "Theodore." My father looked at him. Just looked. And Theodore stopped talking. The Holloways, both of them, were staring at the centerpiece. Arthur and his wife had their hands folded on the table like people in church. The colleagues from Theodore's office were at various stages of wishing they were somewhere else. Uncle Gerald closed the folder. "Frank, I have spoken with your attorney. He is prepared to begin proceedings to reverse the power of attorney filing on the grounds that it was obtained through misrepresentation. As for the removed property, that's a separate matter, and there are options available to you." He looked at Diane. "I would suggest that you and Theodore use the next hour to begin thinking carefully about your choices, because the path forward narrows considerably by morning." Diane finally looked at me. I don't know what she was looking for. Perhaps she thought I might offer something softness. The old reflex I used to have of smoothing things over, of keeping the peace, because keeping the peace was what women in this family did. I had spent 32 years being good at it, being the quiet one, the one who didn't make scenes, the one who drove 2 hours and stood on the porch and drove away without knocking a second time. I thought about Lily's face pressed to the car window. I thought about her carrying that turkey on her lap for 2 hours. I didn't offer Diane anything. Lily had climbed into my father's lap. She was showing him something on the turkey's left wing, a detail he'd missed. A small flower she'd painted there because she said turkeys needed something pretty. My father was listening to her with his whole attention, the way he used to listen to me when I was small. His hand on her back was steady. Uncle Gerald sat down beside me. He poured himself a glass of water and then poured one for me without asking. And then he said, very quietly, so that only I could hear, Your father changed his will 6 months ago. Before any of this, he'd already decided. He paused. He told me he didn't trust Theodore's judgment anymore. He said you were the one who called every week. You were the one who brought Lily. He said, and these are his words. Clara, he said, the house should go to the one who still comes home. My eyes burned. I pressed my thumb against the base of my water glass. He doesn't know about the documents yet, Uncle Gerald said. Not the full scope. We'll get through tonight first. What happens to Theodore? Uncle Gerald was quiet for a moment. That depends on Theodore, he said. It's not my decision to make. Dinner resumed, or a version of it did. Someone passed the rolls. The Holloways asked Lily about school with the focused enthusiasm of people grateful for a safe subject. Arthur poured wine. The candles burned down a 1/4 inch. Outside the dining room windows, the Connecticut night settled in. Very dark, very quiet. Diane and Theodore left before dessert. I heard them in the hall, low voices, Diane's heels on the hardwood, the front door opening and then closing. No goodbyes, no scene, just a click, like the click of a different door on a different night, and then they were gone. My father watched the door for a moment after it closed. Then he turned back to the table and looked at his granddaughter and said, Lily, I believe there is pie, and I believe you should have the first piece, because you made the best centerpiece this table has ever seen. She was off his lap and heading toward the kitchen before he finished the sentence. I sat beside him. For a while, I didn't say anything, and neither did he. The candles threw warm light across the tablecloth. Someone in the kitchen, the Holloway's daughter who was helping with dishes, had put on music, something old and soft and instrumental. I should have called, my father said finally. When the invitation situation happened, I should have called you myself. You called me the week before, I said. You said just come. I did. He turned his water glass in small circles. I meant it. I know. She told me you'd decided not to come, he said. Wednesday evening, she told me you'd sent a message saying it wasn't going to work out. I should have. He stopped. I should have called to ask you directly. I didn't because I didn't want to make trouble in the house. I've been not wanting to make trouble in the house for a long time, Clara. Me too, I said. He looked at me. Really looked, the way parents look when they're trying to account for the gap between the child they knew and the adult sitting next to them, all the time in between. Your mother used to say you were the strong one, he said. Not strong like loud, strong like roots, she said. Theodore bent in whatever wind was blowing, but you put down roots. I thought about my mother, about how she would have handled tonight. She wouldn't have stood on the porch. She would have walked around to the kitchen door and come in through the back. She would have gone straight to her husband and taken his face in her hands and said, Frank, your daughter is here, and that would have been the end of it. But she wasn't here. And some things you can only do yourself. I'm sorry I didn't knock again, I said, when she closed the door. Don't be, he said. You came back. He patted my hand once, the way he'd done since I was small. You always come back. Lily came through the kitchen door, carrying 2 plates of pie with the careful concentration of someone who has been trusted with something important. She set one in front of my father, and then one in front of me, and then she went back for her own and Uncle Gerald's, and then settled into the chair she'd claimed as hers, the way children claim chairs, with the absolute certainty that something is theirs without ever needing to be told. The ceramic turkey sat in the center of the table. The candles lit it from the left so that the painted flower on its wing caught the light. The small, careful flower my daughter had put there because she said turkeys needed something pretty. My father looked at it once and then looked away, and I saw his throat move. Later, after pie, after the Holloways had helped clear and said their goodnights, after Arthur and his wife had put on their coats and Arthur had clasped my father's hand for a long moment in the doorway, the way old friends do when words run out after all of that, I washed dishes with my father in the kitchen while Lily slept on the living room couch under my mother's old quilt, the one with the blue squares, her ceramic turkey on the coffee table beside her. The house, my father said, passing me a plate. Gerald told you. He told me a little. It's what I want, he said. It's been what I wanted for a while. I just didn't. He paused. I didn't know how to say it without it becoming a thing. Everything became a thing. He handed me another plate. It shouldn't be complicated. You love this house. You know where everything is. You know which window sticks in the rain and which floorboard to step over on the way to the bathroom at night, so you don't wake anyone up. He paused. Theodore never learned the floorboard. I set the plate in the rack and took the next one. He's still your son, Dad. I know he is. He rinsed a glass slowly. And I love him the way you love someone who has disappointed you so many times that you've had to rebuild the love out of different materials. Sturdier ones. It's heavier, but it holds. He handed me the glass. He made his choices. He'll have to unmake some of them or live with them. That's between him and God, and whatever's left of his conscience. And Diane? Diane, he said, and stopped. He looked out the window over the sink, dark glass, the reflection of the kitchen floating there like a photograph. I should have seen it sooner. That's the thing I'll have to sit with. I knew something was off. I kept choosing not to know it fully. He turned off the faucet. Your mother would have known in a week. She would have known in a day, I said. He laughed. The real laugh. The one that went all the way to his eyes. I hadn't heard it in a while. It fit the kitchen perfectly. That laugh. The way sounds fit rooms where they've happened many times before. We finished the dishes. He made tea, the same brand he'd been making my whole life. And we sat at the kitchen table, the small one by the window, the one where I'd done homework and eaten cereal, and had approximately 10,000 conversations that I could not have named specifically but that had made me, in aggregate, into myself. Uncle Gerald came in to say goodnight. He was driving back to the Berkshires in the morning. He shook my hand when he left the kitchen, then seemed to think better of it and hugged me instead, brief and firm, and said, "Your father raised you right, Clara. Don't let anyone make you doubt that." Then he went down the hall, and I heard the door of the guest room close. My father's tea steamed between his palms. Outside, the wind had picked up, running through the bare trees at the edge of the yard. I could hear it against the windows. "Stay tonight," he said. "You and Lily. Your old room's made up. I kept the blue blanket in there, the one you liked. We have the drive." "In the morning," he said. "Drive home in the morning when it's light." I looked at my daughter, visible through the kitchen doorway, her dark hair spread across my mother's quilt. I looked at the ceramic turkey on the coffee table. I looked at my father, at his hands around the cup, at the lines in his face that were new since the last time I'd really looked. "Okay," I said. "We'll stay." He nodded once, satisfied, and drank his tea. In the morning, before Lily woke up, I went downstairs in the gray early light and stood in the doorway of the dining room. The candles were long cold. The good china had been washed and stacked. The table was clean except for one thing. My daughter's ceramic turkey, still in the center, exactly where my father had placed it the night before. He hadn't moved it. He'd left it there like it belonged, like it had always been there, like it was part of what this house was, and what it held, and what it would go on holding long after all of us had said everything we needed to say. I straightened the watercolor on the wall, 3/4 of an inch to the right. My father would notice. He would say nothing, but he would notice, and some part of him would rest. Then I went to make coffee, because the kitchen was cold and my daughter would be hungry and the morning was just beginning, and I knew exactly which floorboard to step over on the way.